Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew. Keith Johnson.
I didn't start the fight.
Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
And we're joined by special guest Vandy Beth Glenn.
Yay!
You can't deny the people what they crave.
Oh boy, that could be bread and circuses and all kinds of things.
Well, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah. Now, Keith, before we get started, you said you had a couple of This Week in Trek this week.
Yeah, we've got 2 episodes to discuss. I want to be quick. There was a couple of things that I did want to mention, and I don't do a lot of birthdays anymore, but I thought this one was good because this is one of the greatest antagonists in all of Star Trek history, and we lost her very recently. And on the 22nd of July, 1934, was the birth of one Nurse Ratched.
Oh, okay.
You also remember from Flowers in the Attic, where she played the crazy aunt, whatever, kept the kids locked up in the attic. And then, of course, she was Vedic and Kai Wynn from Deep Space Nine.
That's right.
Late great Oscar winner Louise Fletcher, who by all accounts was one of the nicest, sweetest people you would ever meet. And if I had a nickel for every time I've heard somebody who plays a villain described in real life as one of the nicest people you will ever meet. It's amazing.
The nice people make the best villains.
Yes. Vincent Price was a sweet, cultured person.
That's what they want you to think.
Right. Well, they've got the body parts in the fridge, right?
Right.
A couple other quick things really fast. 25th of July, 1967. I do this because this is seminal stuff. The first day of filming, 1967, of the episode Mirror, Mirror.
Okay.
Nice.
Literally one of the most iconic treks in all of history. You know, everything from the beard to one of Kirk's best speeches. I love in every revolution, there is one man with a vision. One man cannot change the future. And then my greatest line, which I think is interesting, is when Kirk tells Spock, "In my cabin is a weapon that'll make you invisible." It's like, dude, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, really great one. Also, I thought this very interesting. In 1977, 25th of July, also, construction started for new sets for a new product from the mind of Gene Roddenberry. The sets were being constructed for Star Trek Phase 2.
Oh, okay.
Which were obviously later on struck because Star Trek Phase 2 died, and ultimately we got Star Trek the motion picture.
Yeah. I think some of the framing and some of the assets that they had made got rolled into the motion picture and then reused on Next Gen and Voyager, and like they used those things for years.
I hadn't known that project got far enough along for them to build sets.
Mm-hmm. They had started on it.
Yeah, they did. And then 2 more quick things. On the 20th of July, 1965, this is so awesome. Final day of filming for Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Okay.
Nice.
The original pilot for Star Trek, the original series, we now call it the original series. And what was really cool is the wrap party. There was a wrap party thrown by one Lucille Ball, who showed up and invited the entire cast and crew for this thing that she had greenlit, which she doesn't quite know. I've read different stories. Some people say Lucille Ball greenlit Star Trek because she was a visionary and she wanted this cool space show. Others say she literally had no idea. What she heard was that there were women featured prominently on the show, such as Janice Rand, who would later become Janice Rand, and especially Majel Barrett as number 1. And she heard that the suits didn't like the ideas. And she said, wait a minute. I'm not sure what this is about, but I want to give this as a chance if they're going to have women in a powerful position. That's the other story I hear. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but she did greenlight it.
Well, the folks over at Fact Trek, if you've ever followed Fact Trek, they do a lot of evidence-based research on the original series and its history. And they've got a really great article about Lucy's involvement with as far as what the documentation is. So I would recommend people go check out the Fact Trek article. It's like Lucy on Star Trek or something along those lines. If you go Google Lucy, Star Trek, and Fact Trek, you'll get there. But it's great. So was this the wrap party for the original pilot or for Where No Man Has Gone Before?
For Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Okay.
Which that was a wrap party for that.
Yeah.
And that, of course, became the one that became the actual pilot that sold the show to the suits.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, just an important moment in history, July 29th, July 29th, 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was chartered and started, what we now call NASA.
Okay. Wow.
Which is boldly exploring our solar system. Haven't got out of the well, unless you count the Voyager probes, we haven't left the solar system yet. We're getting there.
No, yeah, haven't left it. Yeah, aside from the Voyager probes, but yeah, they've got robots on Mars. They're doing some things. You know,
we're getting there.
Yeah,
and that's this week in Trek history.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening on the audio podcast, we'll take a quick break right here and promote a fellow ESO Network podcast show. But don't go away because we have 2 Star Trek episodes to talk about tonight. So come right back and we'll get into Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Stay right there. And if you're with us live, Veronica, do you want to go ahead and bring us back with a spoiler warning?
Spoilers.
Perfect. Good job. That's going to be spoilers tonight for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Those Old Scientists, and Under the Cloak of War. And Vandy Beth, I know we haven't had you on since Strange New Worlds has been back on. Have you been enjoying the new season of Strange New Worlds?
I've really been enjoying it.
Okay.
I'm not as big a fan of the gimmick episodes as I think a lot of people are. Like I thought the episode where Spock became fully human was just a silly gimmick episode, and that's the sort of thing I think a little of that goes a long way. I don't mind it maybe once or possibly twice a season. But I want more serious stuff from Strange New Worlds as a rule.
Okay. We got some of that this week. So yeah, that's good. All right. Well, do you guys want to start off with Those Old Scientists? I know that we're all big fans of Lower Decks. So, I mean, what do we think about getting some Lower Decks in our Strange New Worlds?
That was amazing.
Okay.
Well,
it was good.
Despite what I just said, I really loved this episode. It's probably my favorite episode of the season.
Okay.
Wow. That's high praise.
Yeah. And we talked about we're probably going to do a show coming up about Star Trek crossover because there's a lot of Star Trek crossover episodes, but I think this one is really successful and maybe more so than any other crossover episode because I think it's a really great episode of both shows, which is hard to do. I mean, you can watch it as a Lower Deck story or as a Strange New World story. I thought they did a really great job of sort of incorporating Boimler and his future knowledge into the various character arcs that have been going on Strange New Worlds. And it's in some cases improving them for me.
Yeah, one thing I liked it. I didn't love it. I liked it. Humor is subjective. But it was funny that you said that, Charles, because one of the things I wrote in my notes was Boimler works really well as a live action actor, even though I've pretty much only seen him as a cartoon, and I think I may have seen the actor's actual face once or twice, honestly.
Okay.
But it's amazing how well he worked. And also, I got the sense that he would actually make a very good serious actor for Star Trek, not just a goofy comedic actor. He actually has kind of a presence about him. He's a lot less slight in real life than he's drawn on the cartoon, for example.
Right.
So I was kind of impressed with that.
Well, Jack Quaid's all over right now. We saw him on Saturday. We saw obviously Those Old Scientists came out, and then we saw Oppenheimer on Sunday, and he was in that as well.
Oh,
really?
He's in Oppenheimer. Excellent.
Yeah, he's getting around. A couple of comments I want to hit real quick. Wayne says hi. Hey, Wayne.
Yay.
Hi, Wayne.
Matt said that they just finished today's episode. Good timing. And then also said that I'm only an ensign. Yeah, I'm Lower Decks, man. I'm an ensign. What are you? Oh, you outrank me.
I outrank you.
Yeah. And then Elaine said this may be her favorite period. I don't know if Elaine means her favorite period of Star Trek or her favorite episode, period.
I think the latter.
Okay.
And Keith, if you've not seen The Boys, I recommend it. Jack Quaid is in that. He's primarily a live action actor, not a voice actor.
I didn't know that.
And
I have never seen The Boys.
He is just terrific, and it's mostly a serious show. So
I will say, watching him on The Boys after having seen Lower Decks, I couldn't get Boimler out of my head. So it was very hard for me to watch The Boys after that.
Yeah. Also, incidentally, he's Dennis Quaid's son.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't
he
know any of this.
he looks like what would happen if Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan had a baby together.
I think that's
Oh my
accurate. I think that's probably very close to what it would look like.
Okay, well that would explain his look then, because the first thing I thought was, man, he's much more of a kind of a powerful physical presence than he's drawn in Lower Decks.
Yeah, I thought he was great. I thought
Yes,
both he and Tawny Newsome did a great job playing Boimler and Mariner in live action.
Yeah. Mariner was a lot more toned down because she doesn't have all those weird, crazy cartoon facial expressions.
Yes.
But I thought it worked out really well for both of
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, she still felt very, very much like Mariner to me,
Yes.
though. I thought she did a great job, and I thought they structured the episode really well because it runs for about 22 minutes, and he's about to go back through the portal, and then Mariner comes through and complicates things, and it goes for another 20 whatever minutes, but it's sort of the length of a Lower Decks episode on both halves. Which I mean, he very easily could have just gone back through the portal right there, and the episode had been over at the 22-minute mark. But I thought that worked out really well.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
I was a little disappointed that it was mainly a Boimler episode, and it was not as much a Mariner episode as it was a Boimler episode. But
yeah,
you got to leave something for season 3.
So were those really Orion? I'm sorry, Benny.
If this becomes an annual crossover, I wouldn't be a bit mad about that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Keith, I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you. Was that so? Those really were Orion scientists?
That looks like it was. They were really. I think it's funny that the Orion scientists really do seem like pirates.
They're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?"
They're very menacing, and then they stole the portal and left.
Take this portal. Peace out.
Right. But that, I mean, again, though, that ties in with the Orion thread that's been running throughout Lower Decks. Of Tendi and the perceptions about Orions. And I thought it worked really well with the time period of him coming back through time 120 years. And even Captain Pike was like, do Orions have science ships? Like, come on, yes.
But as you say, even then, Charles, he's kind of like, what are you going to do to convince us to give it back? I'm like, what kind of scientists are these? We can use some grain, so.
Yeah. Well, you could see how people would perceive them all as being pirates if they all kind of act the way pirates act.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really good. I really appreciated that the Orion ship was reminiscent of the Orion ship from Journey to Babel, the remastered version with the CGI one. The Orion ship in that looked very much like this with a little spinny deal.
Oh, I've never seen the remastered version. That's why I wasn't familiar with that design.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never watched the remastered version, so I didn't know that.
Did you notice that the opening credits were also animated this time out?
We almost skipped it the first time.
And we never skip credits.
Yeah, but we were running behind.
Like this it dropped Saturday. Surprise, they announced that it's going to drop at 7. Well, we had that burlesque show Saturday night, and we had a soft call at 7. So we were already like getting ready and had to go. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we got there and we're like, well, it's a soft call. The doors aren't until 8 and the show's not till 9. So we sat in the parking lot, watched it on my phone.
Are you serious?
So I was gonna skip the credits, and I did. And I had the last little frame of the credits of the ship, and I was like, it's animated. And I had to like back up. Did you guys see the credits?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it looked really good. They even put that crazy monster basically sucking on in the cell.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
And it ended with the space koala.
Right.
Yeah. So they did a good job at that. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah. The ship looks really good with the lighter color tone, a little more like the original series Enterprise. And on Lower Decks, they like, on Strange New Worlds, they like the dark, moody lighting on the ship with the dark colored hull and everything. But I like it brightened up a little bit. I thought it looked really good.
I like the moment when Tendi and Worm, they were saying about how everybody talked strangely.
Right.
They were talking too slowly or something like that.
Right.
Mariner.
What's that?
Mariner and Boimler.
Mariner, yes, I said Tendi. Yeah, Mariner and Boyd. I thought that was so funny because it's right. They talk and act like cartoon characters. And I thought that was so funny. So everybody talks really quiet and slowly. I thought that was really good. And I also love the thing where they were basically pointing out that Boimler and Mariner were acting like fans until then they started talking about the ship before them, and then
Right.
they started acting like fans.
And they're like, oh wait,
Right.
That whole bit with needing the material from the original Enterprise that gave us a way for the Strange New Worlds crew to start acting, to get all fangoobery about Archer's crew the way Mariner and Boimler were about Pike and his crew was just a brilliant move in the writing, because it tied the whole story up into a bow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It really was.
And you mentioned Tendi. Like I was when she said her great grandmother was on the Orion ship, I just knew Noelle Wells was going to be playing an Orion. Like she'd be playing her own grandmother. Like that's how they're going to get her back there. But no,
yeah,
not so far as I can tell.
I wondered if maybe the reason Rutherford and Tendi didn't appear in live action is because of the expense or the difficulty of putting Eugene Cordero and Noel Wells in the makeup required for those roles.
Maybe, but I mean, they painted 3 people green already. You think they could have painted Noel Wells green and it wouldn't be a great expense? And I mean, Rutherford, I think probably what it was is they're trying to, because having just Boimler there is a lot. And then having Boimler and Mariner, I think having 4 of them might have been too much going on.
Yeah,
true.
You know, that's half the size of the crew of the ship that they're on. You know,
right.
So I think spacing it out, I think the pacing of it worked out really well, and you get about half the episode with just Boimler back in time, and then you add Mariner into the mix. But I think it would be difficult to juggle all 4 of them and give them all arcs. You know,
right? And now they've left something for season 3.
Yeah, let's hope.
Fingers crossed.
All right, let's grab a few comments real quick.
Okay.
So Wayne said, probably off the subject, I thought the voice actors looked amazingly like their characters. Was that done intentionally?
I bet it was.
I would think so.
I'm sure.
I know a lot of animated series have been doing that. So Encanto, the Disney one of the newest Disney movies.
Yeah.
All the voice actors, their characters look like them. Like at Dragon Con this past year, a bunch of them were there. They were dressed up like their characters, and they look exactly like their characters.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I think people are doing now.
Yeah, and maybe and with Disney, they might be just getting ready in case they want to go ahead and do a live action remake of their own movie. But
they never do that.
With Star Trek, I mean, you've got a live action franchise, so why not at least make the characters look like, just in case.
And when you have actors who are primarily work in live action as your voice cast anyway, why not just go ahead and base the character designs on them?
Yeah.
All right. Dan asked, are you discussing Under the Cloak of War today too?
Yes.
And the answer is yes.
Definitely.
Wayne said, the monster on the nacelle broke me up.
That was funny, wasn't it?
And Elaine said, oh, I promised Alan that I would tell my one tiny quibble. I wanted a mention of Trip when they were talking about the Enterprise crew.
They did mention Trip.
Did they mention Trip specifically?
Yeah.
Did?
He was.
No, they didn't.
I thought they did.
I don't think so.
I don't remember his name.
Who was Ortega's drooling about?
She was Ortega's was talking about
Mayweather.
Travis Mayweather. She was talking about because she was talking about the great pilot Mayweather, and how she had hero worship for him, which I think was a nod to Mayweather, because Anthony Montgomery has said, I listened to a podcast with him recently. He's like, I didn't have anything to do on that show. So
I know. I was just thinking that must have been season 5.
I was gonna say, Veronica, you can be forgiven for forgetting about Mayweather, because Enterprise's writers always forgot about him too.
They sure did. Yep.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Boimler's reaction to Smiley Spock.
Yes.
Ooh, that was creepy.
And Smiley Spock smile.
Because I feel the same way.
Exactly.
As Boimler.
Yes.
That was creepy. Yes, you might know there was a horror movie that came out recently called Smile. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes.
That smile was creepy. It reminds me of the smile that Christina Ricci gave in the Addams Family movie years ago when they forced her to smile and everybody was scared. That was one weird smile that Spock gave.
Yeah, it was. But I understand, like, you go back in time and you meet Spock and you make him laugh. It's like I just broke history. It'd be a butterfly effect. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And then accidentally telling Chapel that this is just a phase.
Yeah.
That the history knows him as the stoic Spock. And
that scene in the Turbolith was just heartbreaking. Jess Bush's acting was just so perfect and subtle and beautiful. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was all trying to be cool, like, what about Spock?
Right.
And she was playing it off pretty well too.
Yeah.
The Boimler's the most observant person, but
Boimler can't stop telling the future to people.
No, he can't.
He was too excited.
I won't say a word. Worf's honor. Crap. It would be hard though. Don't mention anything that happened after the year 1900. Okay, that'd be tough just conversationally.
Yeah.
Well, like when he met Pike.
I don't think you have that conversation.
Huh?
Yeah. It's like when he met Pike. It'd be like if you met Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy or Bobby Kennedy, and you're just talking to them and they say something like, I'm going to do something in 2 years. You're like, oh, dude, you don't have 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it would be tough. I mean, even like the common turns of phrase would be out of date and potentially spoilery about the future.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was interesting when he was trying to convince Pike to basically enjoy the moment of stepping around it, and Pike basically says, look, I already know what's happening. I don't even know what's going to happen to me.
Mariner's like, you know about the... Yeah. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
All right.
I did
So Dan
too.
said, my quibble was there was no tribble.
Oh, I could go, Dan. Dan, I could go without never seeing a tribble again, honestly.
But now there needs to be the quibbles with tribbles. That's got to be an episode at some
That
point.
needs to be an episode.
That does not need to be an episode.
Yes, it does.
That will not.
Lower Decks episode.
That must not be an episode.
After I saw the attack tribble in Picard, I was done. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm done with tribbles now. I think we're done.
All right. Elaine said they mentioned Mayweather, Hoshi, and Archer. Wayne says, Spock's smile was not a friendly smile. It was a Joker smile.
It was.
I don't know if that's true. I think we just think that because we're so unused to seeing Spock smiling.
That could be. And because we're seeing it through Boimler's perspective.
Yeah.
Where it's super creepy to see Spock smiling.
Right.
And it does seem like a Boimler thing to be like, I went back in time once and made Spock laugh. And everyone's like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we've already seen a trailer for season 4 of Lower Decks, and there's a clip of Mariner saying to Boimler that Pike thing that we're not supposed to talk about.
Yeah. I read that the star date for this episode places it between, I think, episode 5 and 6 of season 3. In case anyone's a nerd for star dates. That's what I read in an article, but I didn't go back and verify that for myself.
I was wondering that.
Yet.
Yeah. I hadn't meant to do the same. I didn't look it up yet.
So Dan said, Spock's high emotionality seemed to work well in conjunction with the cage and where no man has gone before. True.
I said enough about that.
I know. I mean, I agree with him that Spock was more emotional in both of the pilots, but I still feel like Boimler when Spock's smiling and laughing and having relationships. But I get it; it's the story. It's the story that they're telling this season. I'm not object to it, but it does feel weird for Spock to be laughing at jokes and things. But that's the idea. That's the story that they're telling.
Yeah.
And I like that Boimler came back in time and said, "That's weird. That's not what he does in the future." Oh, good, because that's what I feel like he doesn't do in the future too. I'm glad that's still the case.
Well, but also it was odd that the only emotion he seemed to be showing was a sense of humor. He didn't really get angry or sad or I don't know. Name another emotion.
When you talk about Boimler, what he does and doesn't say, what's always interesting is Star Trek does it itself. Is you go back in time and they tell you you're not supposed to change anything. And then if you change something, quote unquote, then you find out you were part of what was supposed to happen.
Sometimes.
So right, exactly. Case in point, Assignment Earth. That did the Gary 7 episode, Gary 7 and Roberta. Well, the Enterprise went back in time. And remember, in the end of the episode, Gary said was even saying, despite the interference from the Earth ship from the future. And then Spock says, no, we were actually part of what was meant to be. But then you have other episodes where you change something and it wasn't supposed to be. So how the heck would you know?
Yeah, I mean,
no way to know.
Right. I like it. Yeah, I mean, even Pike was like, stand right here. Don't tell me about the future. He's like, you're still doing it.
Yeah, how could he not?
But I mean, justifiably, if he thinks that firing on that ship might cause Tendi to never exist, how do you not say something?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Especially if now he's introduced himself as this random element that maybe something he did led to Tendi being erased.
Yeah,
right. Because the way Pike treated him, they acted as if Boimler causing Pike to stand down was the wrong decision. But they finally did get the thing back. And had he gone to a battle, it might have been the wrong decision. So Boimler still could have been necessary for that moment.
Yeah.
Goes back to that little bit of interference, which is really minor. Because I like it. He's telling, don't say anything, but they could be scientists. Okay.
He's like, don't say anything. So he started telling Spock, and he's like, I can still hear you.
Yeah. I was expecting a double cross because even me, they're talking about the prejudices. I'm like, they're Orions. They can't. Now I know you have to have scientists. Every race has to have scientists. I don't care what they are. You got to have Nausicaan scientists. You got to have scientists. I don't know how good they are. But when he told the guy it was a time machine and the dude was still honorable, I was like, wow, I'm surprised. I thought they would just take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like that the scientists feel like the pirates give them a bad name. Like they're tired of everybody thinking they're pirates all the time.
Yeah,
even
I thought
though they
pretty good too.
Stole a relic off the thing to study it.
Well,
we know that there are still going to be Orion pirates in 1,000 years. So,
oh boy, yeah.
Some stereotypes are earned.
Yeah.
Well, the syndicate is vast and powerful. That's for sure.
Yeah. But also, I mean, like in Tendi's time, there are Orions who are mad that they're still pirates. So I thought that tied in really well with Lower Decks. I thought that was really good. Mm-hmm. I really liked Mariner saying that she was not ready for hot young Spock.
That was funny.
Yeah. Well, let's hear some criticisms of this episode. Who has a criticism of this episode?
It was too short.
Okay.
This is just an ongoing thing, and it's a personal preference. I don't care for the Spock Christine thing, so insertion. Yeah, I know. I'm one of those, Vandy Beth. So the insertion of that into any episode irritates me. So I didn't care for the whole Spock stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any real criticisms past that. It was fun.
Okay.
I don't think I loved it, but I really enjoyed it. I had a good time.
Yeah.
I still think that the best humor, and this is a personal thing, I still think the best humor in the entire Star Trek franchise is found in the original series. I think they were better comedic actors than anybody I've seen since, but I really did enjoy this one.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that after Uhura spent all that time figuring out the writing, I would like for that to be more substantive than just. I mean, I'm guessing Nausicaans didn't build it. Maybe Nausicaans found it and wrote, "This is a time machine" on it.
That was hilarious.
It is funny, but I mean, they spent quite a bit of time with Uhura figuring out the thing, and the clue that she got from Ortegas was that I guess she was playing with some Nausicaans in a bar and saw the. That's fine, but then it really didn't lead anywhere. Which I thought that would be an opportunity to have some sort of explanation. I mean, we didn't get much explanation of where this time portal came from, which is fine. We don't have to. But I think finding this ancient time portal and then spending part of the episode investigating the writing, it would have been nice if that writing meant something. I mean, it was a joke, and it was a funny joke, so it's okay.
I thought it was hilarious.
I don't disagree.
I'm with Vandy Beth. I thought it was too short, and I want more.
Okay. Yeah, if they're going to do a Vulcan hijinks episode every year, I don't think we'll see why they can't do a crossover episode every year.
I guess I didn't love it that they introduced yet another random time portal to the franchise, because we've already got the Guardian of Forever, and I guess maybe those Iconian doorways,
the gateways
can also travel through time.
Maybe.
Oh, in fact, I think they can, because there was that Deep Space Nine episode where Molly used one to get stuck in the past. Molly O'Brien.
Was that an Iconian portal?
I think it was, but I'm not positive.
Vandy Beth, I disagree. I don't think there's too many time travel things. There's only the Guardian Forever, the Iconian doors, the crystals on Borat,
the library on Sarpedon.
The library on Sarpedon. One of the stones of the prophets on Deep Space Nine.
Those time crystals.
Yes.
They're all over the place.
Random portals that open up and let Frasier come through. I mean,
yeah. Well, and Keith and I were just talking off mic about this, but after, I mean, it's the season of Picard we got, and then Strange New Worlds. I was glad it was something I've not seen before.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little weary of things that I've seen before. I enjoy the canon callbacks in moderation, but sometimes I feel like I'm drinking out of the fire hose. You know? Yeah. So I do enjoy them, even if I don't ever get an explanation of what this portal was. At least it was something.
I mean, maybe this portal was a relative of the Guardian of Forever.
Maybe
I wondered about that too. I seriously wondered about that because
maybe this was the Watchman of Eternity or something like that.
Well, you gotta wonder if they put that. You know, they have portals in more than one planet, just like the Iconians. So you gotta wonder if that race, whoever they were, had that in more than one location. I could see that. Heck, could have been a slaver weapon for all we know.
All right, let's circle around and grab some comments before we move on to the next episode.
Okay.
Wayne said, "Attack Tribble," and said that was a Joker smile. Matt said, "I'm afraid to check star dates in Strange New Worlds. Trek doesn't have the best track record with them making sense."
I love how Boimer was like, "Oh, 5 numbers. That's a totally normal star date."
Right. Yeah. Well, Strange New Worlds is following the TOS style of them just really being random. Yes. Whereas there's a system for the post TNG ones where you can it's all sequential, and that makes at least some measure of sense because they were tracking it, and they continue that into the new shows. But in TOS, I think last week it was like 23 something, and then this week it was 18 something, which is fine. That's what TOS did. But Gene Roddenberry used to say that it was a measure of not only time but also location. So like it would changes, which is an explanation for why it's random. It doesn't make any sense either. No. But that's what I believed when I was a kid, so I still believe it.
Interesting. When I was younger as a kid, before I knew, I always thought the star date was the local time, but then you don't always have an intelligent species, so you wouldn't have local time. So that theory was gone really quickly.
Yeah.
Star date should be from the moment they went into the stars with warp, and it should start at 1 or at 0 and then go from there. And that's a star date. That's what I think.
Okay.
That's not how it works, but
I've always thought they should just use regular dates. That's the one thing I really like about Enterprise is that they use just.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I agree with that because you start bringing other people into the Federation, they'd be like, "Well, why does the universal time set on Earth clock?"
You know, if it's good enough for Pope Gregory, it's good enough for me.
All right. So Wayne said he did enough angry in charades, talking about Spock. Matt said, "Did I miss something at the end? Did they get the Triticale back?"
Yeah.
I think they did.
I think so. And I liked that it was Tri-Triticale, and then later on they have Quadro-Triticale, and then in the animated series they had Quadro-Triticale?
Quinto-Triticale?
Quinto-Triticale. That's where we go. I said Quadro twice. Yeah. So I thought that was cute. But did you notice they were on Setlik 2?
Yes.
And I kept thinking, I hope they don't resettle them on Setlik 3 because the Cardassians are going to wipe them out later. All right. Dan said, "I thought the Chromoth B portal was too much like a Stargate from Stargate."
I thought that was awesome.
Okay.
Well, I think you're too much like a Stargate from Stargate.
Except TNG season. Oh, Matt says, except TNG season 1, those stardates are all over the place.
Yes.
And then Dan says, "I like how the portal was Nausicaan. After they didn't show up in Star Trek Picard, despite being hugely important to the character of Picard, I've been waiting for more about the Nausicaans to show up. They might have made it, but my impression was just some Nausicaans found it and wrote, 'This is a time portal' on it and left." But
I just love that.
I mean, I don't know if there's any indication that they built it. They might have. I don't know. But I could definitely see ancient Nausicaans finding it and just writing, "This is a time portal," which is important information if another Nausicaan finds it.
Yeah.
That did make me laugh.
All right. All right. Any closing thoughts on that before we move over into Under the Cloak of War?
Riker.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that wasn't clear to me. What room was that? At first, I thought it was part of Pike's quarters, and that's why his saddle was in there.
Yeah.
But then Uhura was also hanging out there too. So why would Uhura and Boimler both be hanging out in Pike's quarters?
Yeah. I don't know.
She said she needed to work there, and I'm thinking, you don't have another room you can go to in that big A ship?
Yeah, you don't have a giant cabin of your own to hang out with?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to Under the Cloak of War, which shifts tone just a little bit.
Wow.
A little bit.
Right.
Does it ever?
What did you guys think?
It was really interesting to finally see some of this Klingon war that Mbenga and Chapel have referenced multiple times in both the first season and the first part of the second season.
Yeah. Well, we got some of it in Star Trek Discovery, but they that they sort of jumped to the mirror universe and came back, and the war was later on. I felt like they could have done more with the war aspect of Star Trek Discovery in season 1, but I did kind of like this was kind of a Strange New World's own take on the Klingon War with like their style of Klingons and so forth. But I do like calling back to things that happened on Discovery because it makes it feel a little more cohesive to me.
Before we started recording, Charles and I were talking, and I was mentioning about my pretty much well-known objection to what I feel are excessive fan service and callbacks, like my personal dislike of the Gorn, the Kirk boys, and the Spock and Uhura thing. And one of the things I was telling Charles that this episode with Mbenga and Chapel made me realize was I've always considered myself to be really open-minded, like with TNG and Deep Space Nine and all the shows come out. I never pre-hate a show. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
And so I always try to make sure that I'm not disliking things simply because I really don't like the idea of the Gorn and Kirk and stuff on the show. But really stepping back and looking at it, I was telling Charles I realized was it's not that I dislike those things because I just refuse to like them. I honestly feel that when they do too much of that canon twisting and forcing the fan service characters, I don't think they do a good job. I don't think the writing is as sharp. So when you have somebody like Mbenga, who's much more of a blank slate, you know, I don't want to. Now, I've heard some people online saying this Mbenga is older than the one in the US. I don't know what that's about. But Mbenga is a blank slate. And frankly, even as Nurse Chapel to a large extent. And so I could sit back, like you were saying, Charles, it's a strange new world, it's a strange new story. I was able to enjoy it, but I think I honestly think they write better when they don't try to twist canon and history and fan service into the show. I feel too much like those things get forced. So when I watched this show, I enjoyed it from beginning to end. And I wasn't freaking too much about, well, did the Klingon War do like this? And how many foreheads, ridges do they have and stuff like that? Yeah. It was a great show. And I was more freaking out about, you have a doctor who takes a Hippocratic oath, who's some kind of assassin, which is just wild. And then jumping ahead a little bit to the end, it's like Han shot first. Okay, who killed who? And I mean, well, we know who killed whom, but what the hell?
Yeah.
Happened behind that frosty door.
Vandy Beth, what did you think?
It was devastating. This is the kind of episode that I want every week from this series. For me, this is the reason Strange New Worlds exists.
Absolutely. Okay.
And not so much the specific history. I too am less fond of the fan service and of the filling in the lines of the original series, but thematically telling stories like this is pretty much why I am here.
Okay. And
the war story, especially the flashback scenes, were just devastating. Although we'll make a note. I was very happy to see the tactical gear from Star Trek Discovery again. So I think those are really
like, hey, that looks like Discovery costumes.
Yeah, and Nurse Chapel looked amazing in that jacket. I loved that.
Yeah.
On a logic note, I'm not sure ground troops make sense in a war like that, in an interstellar war. I would think the battles would mostly take place between starships.
Right.
And what happens on the ground would pretty much be irrelevant to that. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something in particular on the surface of that planet that needed to be preserved and which was valuable to both sides. And that what justifies the ground troops. But that's a minor point. Robert Wisdom, I've loved that actor since The Wire, and he is always terrific, and I love seeing him in this. At Mbenga deleting Alvarado's pattern, that is, if that had been me, that would be something that would never leave me. That would haunt me every hour of every day for the rest of my life.
And doctors aren't supposed to kill.
Yeah.
Even to save others. He killed somebody to save others.
It was a trolley problem. And I can't say that he was wrong at all. And that's part of what makes it such an awful thing to have to do.
Yeah, this episode made me think of a lot of a DS9 episode.
I knew
it had very much that DS9. I mean, specifically a little bit Duet and a little bit Siege of AR-558. It had the not that it was copying necessarily either of those episodes, but it had that feel like they're taking a swing to do a DS9 style like war arc episode, and I thought they did a really good job with it.
You know, it also reminded me, Charles, of another DS9 episode whose name I can't remember, which I think was from season 1 or 2. It's where the famous Bajoran war hero Leonidas was found on a prison colony. You remember that episode?
Yeah.
And he was literally the living embodiment of the Bajoran resistance. And because he had this fierce battle, single combat with this Cardassian leader.
Right.
And he was on his prison colony for years, and they finally found him. And he was literally the symbol of the resistance. And when he had a conversation with Sisko, it turns out he was just walking out. He caught a Cardassian officer who had literally just been bathing or something. It was pretty much mostly naked. Right. And the Cardassian guy was so upset that he fell down and he was nervous. And the gun went off and he got killed. And I'll never forget, Leonidas said the general he killed or who died, he said the look of embarrassment on the man's face. It was not a fierce battle. He was not a hero. He didn't slay this giant. But even Sisko told him, you can't tell the people the truth. You are a symbol, and that symbol is important. Yeah. And I thought about when I was growing up in America, Texas. When I was a kid, I was told that George Washington never told a lie. That George Washington chopped down a cherry tree and admitted it. And we all grew up seeing that picture, which we now know is completely crazy, of George Washington crossing the Potomac River at night in the middle of the winter, standing up on the boat. Right. It's cool. Yeah. But it's symbol, it's imagery. Yeah. It makes you think things. So I'm not saying that guy was wrong, but I understand Mbinga is upset about it as well.
Yeah, I agree with Benny Beth. I mean, Robert Wisdom was really great as was it Ra?
Ra.
Is that his name?
Doc Ra.
Doc Ra, or Ra as he's calling himself now.
Yeah.
It's so good. I mean, he was just great. I mean, I was sorry to see him gone at the end. I would love to have seen him continue. But yeah, and I love the whole thing where now the Federation is embracing this Klingon guy to go around as an ambassador. I mean, it's trying to stoke the relations between them. That seems like something the Federation would do. But yeah, the people who went through a war, like it seems like multiple starships, they'd had problems with this. Wherever the veterans are like, no, like almost having a riot on the ship.
Well, that's
also
true.
He was really pushy. Like, let's heal these things. Let's heal these things. Let's heal these things. Give me a hug. Let's heal these things. And they're like, no, leave me alone. No, leave me alone. Yeah. No, leave me alone. No, oops, I stabbed you.
I think he should. I agree with you. I agree with you, Mark. I think he should have backed away a little bit. But also, you guys talking about Robert Wisdom's performance. What I also thought was really good was in just moments you saw looks on his face. Because remember, at one point, Mbinga thought he was completely full of it. Thought he was pulling some kind of thing, just like Ortegas did.
Right.
And it turns out he wasn't. He was. I mean, he was lying about the history, but he wasn't false in his intentions. But every now and then, you saw looks on his face where you saw that person he used to be. You know, you saw the killer behind the eyes.
Right.
And then you kind of go, is Mbinga right? I thought that was good acting.
Yeah. And then a Star Trek canon callback that I actually really enjoyed was their little workout outfits. Looked very much like the ones from Charlie X.
Yes.
Red orange workout outfits they were sparring in. Like that's the kind of callback that I enjoy because it's subtle.
Too.
You don't have they don't call attention to it. It's just like, oh, that's similar to the other episode where they were in a similar situation.
And speaking of callbacks, the other guest star in this episode was Clint Howard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who has now appeared in 5 Star Trek series over a span of more than 50 years. Of course, as a 7-year-old, he played Baylock in the original series. In Deep Space Nine, he played a 21st century human. I looked all this up. He played a Ferengi on Enterprise. He played an Orion on Discovery, and now he's a crusty old doctor on Strange New Worlds. And I'm here for it. I want to hear his voice on Lower Decks. I want to see him as a professor in Starfleet Academy. He's only 64. He could be in a dozen more Star Trek series before the end of his life. So let's do it.
Yeah, I would love for him to reprise the role of Baylock on Lower Decks. He could do a good Baylock. He did it for, I think it was Shatner's roast. He appeared as Baylock in costume. All right, I need to get some comments. I've been neglecting the comments. Sorry, folks. All right, so Matt Sweatman said this is the most DS9 that Strange New Worlds has ever been.
Yeah.
I think it's the most Star Trek Strange New Worlds has ever been, but that's me.
Yeah.
One of the most Star Trek. I liked it.
Yep. Jumping back to those old scientists, Dan said, do those old scientists include the Orion scientists? And I would say yes.
Yeah, in this case, yes.
Those Orion scientists.
Ooh, good one.
Elaine said, I think they did a really great job showing the war on the surface. We don't always see it. We just hear about it. And the medical area reminded me a lot of MASH.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I liked the little tent city. I thought it was a really good use of that volume. I thought it just all looked great.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne said, episode 8 reminded me of a movie with the same dark tones, but I can't recall whatever movie it was.
Well, thanks for sharing, Wayne.
Dan says, I thought Under the Cloak of War was a poorly written script, incredibly damaging to Mbenga by leaving him as a highly immoral and irredeemable Butcher of Jagal character. But the actors seemed to do the best they could with such badly written material. Great to see Clint Howard back, though. And I disagree with a lot of that. I thought it was quite well written. Whether or not you agree with him killing those Klingons or not. And I don't know that I do.
Well, here's my only thing. It's like the Han shot first thing I was mentioning earlier. And I personally think that Han shot first because originally he did shoot first. And I'm okay with that. If Mbenga straight up murdered the general, I have a problem with it because my wife and I were watching it and she kept saying, well, he didn't have any choice. He had to defend himself. I said, yeah, but the knife was in that box. And I don't know that the general was trying to kill him. So how did the knife get out of the box into the general's chest? I mean, it seems like, and we also just saw Mbenga, even though he's a human, holding his own with a Klingon. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he needed to kill him. So I am struggling a little bit with that. You know what I mean? I'm struggling with that. It seems to me that Mbenga killed him out of hatred. And I do have a problem with that. I agree with Dan there. However, I think everything leading up to that, here's the bottom line. Mbenga is not just a doctor. He was something else before he was a doctor. Because I agree, as a doctor, there's a Hippocratic oath that they don't kill. But he's something else. He's not McCoy. He's not the wise country doctor. He's not Bashir, the callow youth straight out of the academy.
Right.
He's something else. I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
But I mean, and even going back to when he deleted that guy in the transporter buffer, he deleted one guy so that they could beam in everybody else and save those lives. So, I mean, he may have just looked at it as he's killing 4 Klingons to save countless other people because they are slaughtering people. I mean, as he told it, slaughtering families, civilians, children, anyone who wasn't a Klingon warrior is going.
Yeah,
and
even
so
Klingon people.
Yeah, is it immoral to kill those 3 people if you're saving those other people?
Right.
I think it's against the oath, so I didn't have a problem with that because a doctor swears that they will do no harm, and of course this is not do no harm with an instrument. So I think killing that guy I do think it was the wrong decision. But I understand why he made that decision because he was messed up by then. One thing I did think was kind of cool, we were talking about filling out technology, and filling in the blanks. I thought it was cool that when they cleared the buffer and people started beaming in, they actually added these little graphics that showed like codes. They were talking about the whole buffer. They actually showed the buffer filling, and there was a different number code for every person.
Right.
I thought that was kind of cool. And Matt,
they look like Blue Sky invite codes.
and Matt Sweatin was talking about in one of his reviews of the final watch of the original series, talking about that famous thing about all this Star Trek tech that they introduced that they never use again.
Right.
Well, Mbenga has perfected the store people in the buffer thing, but nobody uses it other than him and Scotty on the Dyson Sphere. Right. I mean, that thing would replace Walt Disney getting his head chopped off and put in liquid nitrogen. I mean, I don't know why the Federation doesn't have whole buildings and banks of people with terminal diseases kept in a transporter buffer, but we have no indication everybody uses it all the time.
Would you go in one?
No.
If I were terminal, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I were terminal, I'd say, put me in there, and then because you won't know any passage of time.
Yeah.
And then, you get dematerialized 1,000 years later, there you are.
And you're too fixed. That's what happens.
Y'all forgive me for talking too much. This show really resonated with me a lot, but I thought but as Mbenga's ethics aside, it's a very insightful show about the human nature, because one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the show was NASA. NASA was incorporated in 1958 in July 1958. The person who was most responsible for our rocket program, it was, in my opinion, a Nazi war criminal, and that was Werner von Braun, one of the most brilliant men who ever lived. He came up with the concept of multi-stage rockets, which is how we got off. He came up with the concept, talking about a wheeled space station. The United States space program would not have gotten as far as fast as it did without Werner von Braun. However, when he was in Germany, his rocketry work was done in a factory that was populated by Jewish slaves. Lots and lots of Jewish slaves died working on rocket programs for Werner von Braun. He claims later he didn't know. He knew. You can't not know that. And yet, what did we do? We got him because we didn't want the Soviets to get him. Yeah. And we forgave him. And we took a whole bunch, because if Hitler hadn't been a racist, the truth of the matter is that Germany would have had the atomic bomb before we did.
Right.
But so much of the research of the atomic bomb was done by Jewish scientists, and Hitler didn't want to use that research. So after the war, we took a whole bunch of Nazi scientists basically in this country.
Yeah.
And because you got to do what you got to do. So as horrible as it was for those people to deal with that general, that's what we do. Jerry Adams, who led Sinn Féin, the IRA, Jerry Adams was a terrorist. Next thing you know, he was a politician in a suit.
Yeah.
Tough.
We're getting close to time. Let me grab a few comments real quick. So Dan said, I thought it was a lot less powerful than the DS9 episodes it pulled inspiration from.
He's wrong.
Matt Sweatman said, I had a hard time wrapping my head around the existence of a Klingon defector. I didn't think that was possible, which we can come back to. Michael Phillips said, I thought it was a brilliant episode and a great study of veteran PTSD. I'd like to see episodes like this every week rather than wasting time on fan service stuff and gimmick episodes.
Amen, brother.
Dan said, this episode seems to weaken Star Trek 60 Undiscovered Country, as I always thought that was a more unique situation than this episode makes out.
He's wrong.
Wayne said, I thought Clint Howard passed on. Nope.
No.
He's only 64.
Yep. Michael Phillips said, I love Clint Howard's malapropisms.
I didn't notice any.
Dan said, I like the continuity regarding Mbenga and the transporter buffer relating to his daughter.
That's what I thought of when he first talked about
it.
Matt said, I never thought we'd get a Han Shot first reference here tonight. Full of surprises. Dan said, do you think Mbenga either A, deliberately gave Ra an honorable death, and or B, saved Ra in the transport buffer after he was stabbed? I think no, neither of those. Wayne says, maybe, but I've heard many accounts of military doctors taking up arms.
Absolutely.
Sure. People are complicated.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Matt said, I figured they'd bring me back, and I'd want to see Atlanta Braves baseball on the view screen. Dan said, my working theory is that maybe Mbenga panic attacks over the Klingon War might lead to him leaving on his Vulcan away time referenced in the original series.
That would make sense.
Michael said, I figured this is how Mbenga gets busted down from chief medical officer. Somehow it catches up with him. And then And then Wayne says there was an episode of the Apple TV show For All Mankind where they addressed Von Braun's activities, and that's true.
Yeah.
That's a big part of For All Mankind,
and that is a wonderful series.
Yes, Keith, it is.
I know, but he's been telling me get to watch it.
I've been bothering him for a year and a half about this.
With the writer strike, I'll be getting to it for sure. One quick thing about Mbenga. McCoy specifically said Mbenga interned on Vulcan, so I think that's in his past, not in his future.
And you can always go back there.
Yeah, and there's been a huge discussion online on Facebook groups about how is it that McCoy ended up as the chief medical officer, not Mbenga, and then Mbenga came back. I don't think that he needs to be busted, demoted, or anything like that. I think he was simply transferred off the ship and went somewhere else, and probably served a little bit of time on Vulcan. That happens all the time. He might have been, they might have been in his area of space. They might have called him back to do consults with McCoy. I don't think that it has to be in this big mystery like, well, Mbenga got busted or something like that's been online. People like he must have been demoted because he's working under McCoy. I don't know if that's the case. I think he might have just been working with McCoy for a little while.
Could be.
On the ship.
Maybe he'll go to Starfleet Medical for a season and then come back to the Enterprise.
That could be.
That's very true.
But if they decide to go the route that he was busted down, I mean, there's a lot of reason for it at this point. He's got the hiding his child in the transporter buffer. He's got the Klingon super serum he keeps in his pouch. He's got the stabbing the ambassador.
Yeah, that was interesting because he said Protocol 12. He said Starfleet when Andorian was asking him to make some. They made this farm. He said Starfleet no longer produces it. So this was a sanctioned thing by Starfleet. Chew on that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean they're going to war with Klingons. I mean, we've talked before about genetic manipulation, but I mean, it might make sense to give your people an edge if they're having to go hand-to-hand combat with Klingon soldiers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So many people have problems with that. Gene Roddenberry would have had a problem with that drug.
Oh, he would have hated this whole episode.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with it because that, like you said, Vandy Beth, we're complicated and we do horrible things.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go. You're the guest.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make a general note about the show. When Strange New Worlds premiered, everyone was talking about how it was going to be an episodic series, and the stories would be episodic and not serialized. They seem to be having it both ways, though. Each episode is does have a self-contained story, but the character work builds up over time.
Right.
And it reminds me of as one example, the episode in the original series where we learned that Kirk survived a massacre as a child in Conscience of the King, and then there's that whole thing about Kodos and Kodos the Executioner. The difference is that in the original series, that sort of thing would be brought up for one episode out of nowhere, and then after that episode, it would never be mentioned again. These things happen in Strange New Worlds, and they become a known part of that character, and they make use of it again, and they reference it again. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's a great thing about the series.
I think that's true. Yeah, Deep Space Nine became really good at that too, where you truly saw character growth. Although sometimes they didn't, because O'Brien got tortured so many times in the series. He should have been much more jacked up. But Enterprise did that very well with people like T'Pol and Trip's relationship. These people grew over time. And so I agree. Mbenga and Chapel are growing over the course of the series, and you're getting more and more. This is where they can. I'm really liking Chapel. She's nothing like Christine from the OS, but I like that character.
Yeah.
You drop a romance with Spock, and I'm there all the way.
I think they're heading that way. So you might get your wish. All right. Any closing thoughts on that before we close this thing out?
It was Trek at its best because it's making me think, and I think it's great that Dan made that comment because I have a huge problem with Binga killing that one guy more than I have a problem with Binga being an assassin.
Yeah.
But that's what it's about, is to make you think and be uncomfortable. And I'm uncomfortable now. And
they left it a bit vague about how exactly it went down.
Yeah.
So I guess it's left up to us. But
yeah,
my generally I prefer when Star Trek characters work things out and learn how to work together, and I like the optimistic thing. But I was driving to work this morning and thinking about it, and it'd be that can't happen every time, or it's going to happen every time, and it just becomes pat. It's
Yeah.
Now's the part where we all get along. So, I mean, I thought this was a very good episode. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, because Mbinga at the end told Pike basically, you don't know what I've been through. You can't talk to me about this.
Right.
Wow.
All right. Vandy Beth, thank you for joining us. This has been great.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy it.
Where can people find more of you?
Well, I have my own podcast called Jettison Pod, which is the podcast about comedy in science fiction. We've discussed many Lower Decks episodes there, and also the work of Douglas Adams. We've taken a look at Futurama and at She-Hulk, and we have big plans for talking about movies and more science fiction literature. And I've had all three of you as guests on the show in the past, and probably will have you more in the future. So please check it out, Jettison Pod.
Awesome. It's great. It's great. I was just listening to you had this sort of essay about the inner light and hard time with some really great thoughts. I thought things I hadn't thought about those episodes and about the technology involved and the potential repercussions. Everyone should check it out. Check out Jettison Pod. It's really great. It's a really great podcast.
Thank you.
Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Well, excuse me, X and Facebook. Primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
FeltNerdy.com.
And?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
The portal is portaling me.
Perfect. Quit lurching towards it. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for participating, folks.